Hey folks, this is a homework video on 3.4 practice B, and I thought I'd go through some of these examples for you and let you check your work as we go. So let's get started. So basically we have 3.4 practice B in front of me, and I'm going to go through the entire sheet. So if you were not assigned some of these, just be patient. I'm not going to do multiple videos for different classes, but this is 3.4 practice B. I have 4 problems on this first slide. Number 5 on the second slide, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on the third slide, 10 on the fourth slide, 11 and 12 on the fifth slide, and 13, a little crooked on the last slide. Let's get started on the first page. Okay, so number 1, it says 2 minus q over 3 divided by 3 is greater than 6. Okay, so what we're going to first do with this is that we're going to take this 2 and subtract it from both sides. And when we do that, we end up with negative 1/3 times q is greater than 6 minus 2, which is 4. Okay, now this is a subtract 1q over 3. So I just converted it to subtracting 1/3 times q is greater than 4. Okay, so if we're going to solve this, you would actually multiply that by the reciprocal of 1 over 3, which is negative 3 over 1. Negative 3 over 1. So when we multiply by a negative 3, we reverse the sign, which now becomes less than. And we have q is less than 4 times negative 3, which is negative 12. And the graph would look something like this. You'd have a small little graph here. You'd end up with negative 12 down here. And it would be q less than negative 12. So you have a circle at negative 12 and then everything off to the left. Number 2, 7 is less than or equal to 0.5v plus 10. Subtract 10 from both sides. And 7 minus 10 is negative 3. Less than or equal to 0.5 times v. Then in order to offset this multiplication, undoing the multiplication with division by 0.5 and division by 0.5, and you have yourself v. We'll flip it around at the end, but negative 3 divided by 0.5, which is going to be negative 6. So v is greater than or equal to negative 6. So I always told my students that when you have something like this where the variable is on the right, it'd be good practice to flip this around to have v greater than or equal to the negative 6. And what that does is easier for you to explain the solution set. So v is greater than or equal to negative 6. Negative 6 is here. And we're going to have a solid dot there. And we're going to have a greater than symbol going off to the right. Number 3, negative 1/4 less than or equal to 4k plus 7/4. First step would be to subtract 7/4 on the right and the left. And what that would detail then would be negative 1 minus 7 would be negative 8/4. Negative 8/4 would be less than and equal to 4k. And you see there that -8 force is -2, less than equal to 4K. And to undo the multiplication by 4, you divide by 4. And what we have here is -1/2. We leave the sign alone because it was a +4, less than equal to the K. Or in other words, K is greater than and equal to -1/2. And you could graph it by looking at a -1/2 and calling that a solid dot, and be K greater than that to the right. Put your 0 in there. And that'd be number 3. So number 4, 1.2, 3.6. We're going to subtract the 3.6 from the left and subtract it from the right. And what that does then is it clears out the left side, and you have -2400 times n, less than, this is 1.2 minus 3.6 is going to be a -2.4. Okay, -2.4. And then if you divide by -0.24, divide by -0.24. And since we're dividing by the negative, we're going to reverse the sign. That now becomes a greater than sign. So n is greater than 2.4 divided by 0.24 is 10. That's a +10. So n is greater than a +10. So here's your 0. Here's your 10. You'd have your circle at 10, and it would go off to the right. Okay, and that's the first 4 questions of 3.4 practice B. Moving on to number 5. An RV park receives $300 for per month. Okay, so per month. So if you were in my class the first trimester, whenever you see something that's 300 per month, that's a rate. Okay, so whenever we think of rate, that can be interpreted as slope. Okay, 300 per month from each residential site that is occupied, as well as $2,000 per month from their overnight sites. So they get this $2,000 a month for folks just come to stay overnight as they are camping. Okay, so it says write and solve an inequality to find the number of residential sites that must be occupied to make at least $14,000 in revenue. So they're going to take $300 a month times the number of units, I'll call it X. And then we're going to add the 2,000 because that's the folks that are just stopping off and overnight stays. And we have to make, it has to be greater than or equal to $14,000 in revenue. Okay, revenue is money coming in the door. It's not expenses. So again, $300 per month. So X is the number of units. So there's your 300X, as well as you're adding the 2,000 greater than or equal to 1,400. So there you can kind of see where that equation would fall in, but it's an inequality because we're trying to relate it to at least 14,000 greater than or equal to 14. All right, if you're going to solve this, you're going to subtract the 2,000 from both sides. And that gives you $300 a month times X units would be greater than or equal to $12,000. Okay. And then you take and divide by the $300. 300. and you'd have the number of units X greater than or equal to 12 divided by 3 is 4. And you got 40 units. So $12,000 divided by $300 a unit is you have to rent 40 units or more to break even, to make at least that $1,400 in revenue. So 12,000 and you're dividing it by 300, it's 40 units for number 5. Okay, then we're going to move down to solving again, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 10, we have a word problem, but this is just, we're just going to solve. We're going to look for 2 things, no solution, okay? And IMS, that might be in this section. Or I think that might be these 2, but let's look at number 6 first. Okay, distributed property, negative 5M. Okay, negative times a negative be a positive 10, greater than 30. Now we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. And we end up with negative 5M greater than 20. Divide by negative 5. Divide by negative 5. You'd have M, we're going to flip the sign now, to less than negative 4. So negative 5M plus 10, because we have a negative times a negative is a positive 10, greater than 30. Subtract 10 from both sides. Negative 5M is greater than 20. Divide by negative 5 on both sides. Flipping the sign, you have M is less than negative 4. Negative 4. Okay, moving on to number 7. Negative 3 halves times F. Negative 3 halves times F plus negative 3 halves times 6, which would be 2 and the 6 would cancel. You'd have 3 left over. 3 times 3 is 9, and it would be a negative 9. Less than, equal to, negative 6. Negative 6. Next step would be to add 9 to both sides. Add 9. And you would have negative 3 halves. F would be less than or equal to negative 6 plus 9, which is positive 3. And then the last step, you would multiply by the reciprocal of negative 3 halves, which would be negative 2/3. And the reciprocal would be negative 2/3. Flipping the sign around, you'd have greater than or equal to sign. F would be on the left. The 3's would cancel each other, and negative 2 would be on the right. So F is greater than or equal to negative 2. Negative 2. Number 8. 10.5 less than 1.5 times P minus 1.5 times 3, which is going to be 4.5. 4.5. Add 4.5 to both sides. Add 4.5. You would have 15 on the left and 1.5 P on the right. Divide by 1.5. Divide by 1.5. And you would have yourself P on the right. 15 divided by 1.5, I believe that would be 10. 10. So P is greater than 10. Moving on to number 9, 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 1 is 2. Greater than or equal to 2x plus 4. And by subtracting 2x from both sides, that brings you down to -2 is greater than or equal to +4. And this just doesn't make sense. It's not greater than or equal to +4. So this is no solution. No solution. So keep in mind, this is in this section. You may have that as one of your answers. -2x minus 2x. And keep in mind, when you see this 2x and 2x, the -2 is greater than or equal to 4. That's no solution. And that is number 9. Moving on to number 10. Write and solve an inequality that represents the values of x for which the area of the rectangle will be at most 45 square meters. Okay, so the key word here would be area and at most. So it could be less than or equal to 45. Now, area is the length, x plus 3, times the width, 4.5. Okay, so the length is x plus 3, the width is 4.5, and it has to be at most 45. So it's got to be less than, or it could be equal to 45. Okay, so again, if you were curious on this is from 3.1, this wording at most. 3.1, there's a nice graph there that tells us some of the symbols with regards to the words, but at most would be less than or equal to. All right, so moving on here, you just go to solve, you go 4.5 times x, distributed property, and then 4.5 times 3 would be 13.5, I believe. Let me just double check that. 4.444 would be 12. Then the 0.5 times 3 would be 1.5. So 13.5. Less than, equal to 45. And when you go to solve this, you're going to subtract 13.5 from the left, 13.5 square meters from the right. And that's going to put you in a position where you have 4.5 times the x is less than or equal to, and this is going to be 45 minus the 13, be 10, 35, 35, 31.5, right? 31.5. And then to divide by 4.5 on both sides of the inequality would put you in the answer of x less than or equal to, I'm gonna have to use the calculator for this one, sorry. 31.5 divided by 4.5, 7. So they're wondering what x has to be for the area of the rectangle. The area x has to be less than or equal to 7 for it to have to be at most 45 square meters. Okay, so that's a good little problem. Area, length times width, at most less than or equal to, and that is number 10. X less than or equal to 7. Okay, almost done. 11, 12, and 13. Solve the inequality, graph the solution. Okay, so we got all kinds of x's here and v's over here. Let's combine our like terms first. 12 minus 5, which is 7x, minus the 4, greater than equal to 52. Okay, that's just simplifying. Like terms here, 60 minus 8 over here. Okay, add 4. Add 4. And you would have 7 times x greater than equal to 56. Divide by 7. Divide by 7. And x has to be greater than or equal to 56 divided by 7, which is 8. And if you're going to graph that, oops, that was a bad line there. Graph that, it would look like this. Get 0, you'd have 8, and you'd have your greater than or equal to. So you have solid dot, and everything would go off to the right. 7 times 8 is 56. Okay, so simplifying, move forward with that. Let's try number 14 here. Number 14 is 4 and 6 V's, gives you 10V, plus the 3.2, less than 6.8 minus 9.2, and that is 6, 7, 2.2, 2.2, 2.4, negative 2.4. Okay. So 6.8 minus 9.2 is negative 2.4. Okay, so first step would be to subtract the 3.2. Subtract the 3.2. And that would bring you to 10V less than, this would be 6, 5, a negative 5.6. Negative 5.6 divide by 10. Divide by 10. You'd have V less than negative 56. 56. Or is it 0.56? I went the wrong way. Yeah. 0.56. So V's got to be less than negative 0.56. It's getting late in the day, and sometimes I start to make quick answers on things. 5.6 divided by 10 is 0.56. So negative 0.56. If you were to graph this one, you would have a negative, here's your 0, and here's your 1, negative 1. Negative 0.56 is right about there. Negative 0.56. You would have a circle, and you're going to be graphing everything less than that. Less than. Okay, and that would be number 12. And number 13, last question on 3.4 practice B. An animal shelter has fixed weekly expenses of $7.50. Each animal in the shelter costs additional $6 a week. Okay, so there's your rate. Okay, $6 a week. During the summer hours, the weekly expenses are at least $11.70. Okay, so during the summer could be greater than or equal to $11.70. All right. Write and solve an equality to find the number of animals at the shelter for expenses to be at least $11.70 a week. So I already got the $11.70 down. It's going to be $6 times the number of pets. Then I'm going to add the fixed expenses of $7.50. And that's going to be greater than or equal to $11.70. Okay. So we're going to subtract $7.50 from both sides. We have 6x has to be greater than or equal to $11.70 from $7.40. $11.70 minus $7.50. That's 420. Now we're going to divide by the 6. Divide by the 6. And it says there that X, the number of animals, got to be greater than or equal to 70. Greater than or equal to 70. Letter B, during the winter months, though, the weekly expenses are at most $900. Write and solve an inequality to find the number of animals in the shelter for expenses to be at most $900. Okay, so it says here the fixed expenses are $750. Okay, so that doesn't change and has to be at most $900. So it could be less than or equal to the $900. Okay, $900. And during the winter months, so the 6 times X stays the same. We're going to add the 750. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 750. Subtract 750. And that puts you at $250. Less than, equal to 6 times X. So 6 times X, less than or equal to 250. Dividing by X, you add about 40 animals. Okay, 40 point whatever animals on there. Letter C, the cost for each animal has increased by $2. What will the maximum weekly expenses during the winter months? Okay, so it says there the cost for the animals is increased by 2, so now it goes from $6 to $8 an animal. And what will the maximum weekly expense during the winter months? So it says there that the maximum weekly expenses for at most $900. What will be the maximum weekly expense for a $2 increase? Looking at this question, I'm trying to quickly answer this for us. Cost for each animal is increased by $2. What will the maximum weekly expenses during the winter months? Okay, so here's the winter months scenario. It goes from 6 to 8, and it's be 750 less than, equal to, okay, so something didn't quite feel right there. So what I did there is I went back to this number, letter B. I made a mistake. So this would have 900 minus 750 should be 150, or that should be X is less than or equal to 25. And the last question then would be 200 plus 750. They asked if you increase the animal per animal to $2, it'd be $8 now. And if you had 25 animals in there, it'd be 200 plus the 750. It would be 950 for the winter months. Okay, so that pretty much concludes our presentation here. Sorry for kind of a rough ending there. I kind of got off track on that. And I make sure I got that on there. So yeah, so if you take a look at this last, I switched the 900 minus 750 is 150, divide that by 6 to get X is less than or equal to 25. And then letter C is 8 times 25, which is 200 plus 750 is equal to 950. Okay, so that concludes the 3.4 practice B. And hopefully that was helpful with yesterday's assignment. Have a great day.